Amen. I wanted to know, as we get started with Birthday Sunday, turning 6 years old is a big deal. For those of you who are new with us and you're like, what is going on today? Today's Birthday Sunday. We launched out of Newnan High School January 14th, 2018. And this is the first time we've had a Sunday fall on our actual perfect anniversary, right? And so this is a big deal. This is a big Sunday for us, 100%. And so I wanted to make sure that we were celebrating appropriately. And so I Googled, what are the top 10 ideas for a 6-year-old birthday party? And two of them were really lame. I'm not going to share those two with you, just in case some of you have that planned in the next couple of weeks. I'm not stepping over toes just yet. I'm going to get there, but not yet. So I wanted to share the 8 of the 10 that I thought were actually pretty good ideas. Number 1 is a 6-year-old could have a really great tea party. I've never done a legit tea party, but I think if you could go all out and for sure do a legit tea party, I think that could be entertaining to let 6-year-olds pour tea fancy way with really expensive china, and let's just see what breaks. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a good idea. Number 2 is to have an adventure scavenger hunt. Now, we kind of do this a little bit in Church on a Hike in September, where we don't have gatherings here. We all go to the state park and we set up a curated hike through Chattahoochee Bend State Park in one of their trails next to the river. And so we're not going to do that because we already kind of do that in September. The third idea was a sprinkle party. Who doesn't love sprinkle parties? You know what I'm saying? You just get some cupcakes, you get some cake, and you just sprinkle everywhere. That's a good idea. We're not going to do that, though. We got a sprinkle fan. That's good. Number 4 was a pajama party, which I thought would be inappropriate for adults here at Foundation. So we're not going to do that. The kids have done pajama parties. Theirs are cute and wholesome and those things, but I know some of you, and I just don't trust your pajamas. Number 5 is a pool party, which we were going to do, but it's too cold. You know what I'm saying? We were going to do that. It's not as cold as Launch Sunday, though. Launch Sunday, this Sunday 6 years ago. Anybody remember how cold it was here? 14 degrees. In fact, we've got a picture of you standing in a coat that you would wear to New York in the middle of who knows what. Welcome to church. Yeah, that's what it was. It was good. It was good. Next one was a trampoline party. We don't have the insurance for that, so we're not doing that. The next one was a petting zoo, but I was afraid that if we did the pajama party, we might end up like a petting zoo, and that would also be inappropriate. So that's not a good thing either. And so the last idea that I thought we could pull off was an ice cream party. So check, we're going to do that. That's going to be good, yeah. We have special birthday ice cream in the ice cream truck, so it's not just normal ice cream sandwiches and popsicles. There's some birthday ice cream in there, and so you get to have that. And then you don't get to be surprised because at the 9, we rolled in the fire truck during the gathering, and then we pulled up the windows and you saw it. So you already know the fire truck. You'll figure out how this all fits together here in just a few minutes. But you don't get the surprise. You probably in fact, some of you probably should have been like, oh, it's on fire. We shouldn't go today. And we would have had seating. But all of you came anyway. That's probably what happened. Actually, most of you are supposed to be across the street or next door, but you're like, what's going on next door? Let's go see what's on fire. And now you're stuck. Now you're stuck. You can't get out. I got you. That's it. No, the question is, when we talk about our birthday, why is it so special? Well, it's because we take inventory. Who are we becoming? Who are we growing into? Who do we want to become? We're 6 years old. That's nothing. It's nothing. It's just 6. Think about 6-year-old you. Think about how far you've come. We're just getting started. There are so many more opportunities for us to develop and to change and to become. Who are we becoming? Who do we want to become? I want to share something from the writings of a church planter named Paul that's inspiring to me. He wrote a letter to the church at Philippi, which was a church that he planted and helped get started and helped to grow. He planted it around AD 50, and about 5 or 6 years later, he went back and he visited again to check in and see how things were going. And then about another 5 or 6 years past that, about 7 years past that, he wrote a letter. And this letter that we received kind of this information from was a letter that was written while he was actually in prison. And he wrote it to this church that he had helped give birth to. And this was a very significant church to him. When you read the letter to the Philippians in the Bible, you can see that there's a very personal connection between the planter and the church. more so than almost any other church that he planted. He planted a bunch. But there's just something about the Philippian church that is so significant to him. In fact, I love the way that he opens his letter, and this tells us about that significance. This is what he says. He says, I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. I love what he says. I love that he helps plant this church. He visits the church. He invests in the church. And then when he's writing a letter, he's like, let me just be honest with you. Every time I think about y'all, I thank God for you. And then not only that he prays for them in joy, that just the thought, the feeling, the sense that he gets when he's thinking about this particular church, he's just like, it makes me joyful. I wonder if the people that helped plant Foundation feel that way when they think about us. I want to give you a list. Community Christian Church in Sharpsburg was an enormous supporter of us getting started. Ed Martin is the lead pastor there, and he poured so much, and that church poured so much into helping us get started. There's a church in McDonough called Momentum Christian Church. Bart Stone is the lead pastor there, and they invested so much in helping us get started. Cross Plains Christian Church in Carrollton, the lead pastor there at the time was Joel Einan. So much. Peachtree City Christian Church in Peachtree City. They invested so much in helping us have finances to get started. The Bridge Christian Church in Chattanooga. Verve Church in Las Vegas, just off the Strip. The Atlanta Church Planting Network, Stadia Church Planting. That is a list of an enormous amount of people, some of them representing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that invested and gave and offered volunteer opportunities and money and finances and leadership capital, all of them. And I wonder when they think about who we are 6 years in, if they would say the same thing that Paul says, I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ. I wonder if that's what they think, because that's what Paul, the planter, was thinking about his church. Paul continues saying it this way, and this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. So if that's what we want to be, if we want to be a church that brings joy at just the simple thought of who we are, if we want to honor those people that invested so much to help us get started, how do we pull that off? And are we pulling it off? Our desire as a church is to be exceptional at three things. I want to pull back the curtain just a little bit this morning and attempt to walk you through three really important things for us as a church. The first one is a catalytic weekend experience. Surrendered living is the second. And the third is life-changing relationships. That when we think about those three things, we want to be exceptional at these things. We want to understand the desires of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus and leverage them in these very three practical ways. And I just want to walk through them briefly with you. The first one being a catalytic weekend experience. You're sitting in it right now. The idea of catalytic is so important. That word means an agent that provokes or speeds significant change or action. And so when we think through our Sunday morning experience, we want to make sure that as we're thinking through whatever lens it is for the day, for the teaching, that we're leading people to consider doing something about what Jesus says. That we never want to simply be the checkbox where someone says, all right, I've done my Jesus thing this week. I went to church. No, we want this to be the beginning of the process. That when you sit here on a Sunday morning, that it's the beginning of your week. It's the beginning of your interaction with the will of God, not a checkbox to complete it for the week. And so we think through the idea of being catalytic, man, we are thinking we want to create and produce change. We've been tracking next steps since September of 2020. 2020 is a really good time to start tracking next steps because everybody was stuck, not taking next steps. So it's a great time to start tracking them. We missed a few years, so we have stats. Since September of 2020, we've had 1,845 next steps that have been taken at Foundation. So we're missing a few years. We have no idea what the actual number is from 2018 forward, but 1,800 and some odd steps since we've been tracking it in the middle of September of 2020. But the truth is that statistics, while we keep track of them and they give us a little bit of information, they inform kind of how things work. The truth is, at the end of the day, statistics don't tell us everything we need to know. I want to share a story with you that really exemplifies what a catalytic weekend experience is supposed to do. If you were here with us in the fall, you probably remember we did a marriage series. And then about 3 or 4 weeks after that, we followed it up with a series on mental health. And we do a mental health series every single fall. But the marriage series, we typically do earlier in the year, but we saved it for the fall. And that's just the way the calendar fit. And so both of those series, though, we had an enormous emphasis on counseling. And we just said, hey, we want to make sure that you know that there are Christian counselors in our community that we are partnered with, and we want to connect you with them. And we believe that it's a really good idea for you to sit down and have a conversation with those counselors. And so at the end of our mental health series, we had a number of providers here on campus. If you went outside, there was tents everywhere, like a little tent city set up, and each one was a different counseling organization. And we just wanted people to be able to interact and just ask questions, to take some cards. And we told everyone that Sunday, hey, no matter what, everybody go to a tent and take a card, whether you need it or not. That way the people who actually need to go won't feel like everybody's watching me go. So everybody goes to the tent. And so everybody started going to the tent and picking up cards and having conversations with people, and it was great. There was a guy here that weekend, and he was only in our church for one Sunday. He was here visiting a family member, or he was actually here visiting a friend, but they invited him to come to church because he happened to be in town on the weekend. That wasn't the plan. And he's from the other side of the country, like West Coast, way over there, right? And he came to that last series, and he approached me afterwards. I was standing just outside under the overhang, and he came up to me and said, hey, man, I love what y'all are talking about in terms of mental health, those things. And I made an offer, which is still standing. We've done this offer from the very beginning. Anyone who wants to go and see a Christian counselor, we'll pay for the first opportunity for you to go, right? Your first visit we'll pay for, no questions asked. We don't want the financial thing to be a thing. And so whether it's marriage counseling or just some personal things you need to kind of walk through, we'll foot the bill for it, right? And so I reminded everyone that that's our policy here at Foundation, has been for years. And so I mentioned it that day. So he came up to me and he was like, hey, I think that's incredible how y'all do those things. He's like, my wife and I have benefited from Christian counseling. And so for sure, I feel like we should invest. And I was like, okay, well, thank you. That's great. I appreciate it. He's like, so how do I give money to that? And I was like, we can go online. Here's the thing. He's like, great. We want to take care of at least a couple of people's first times. And I was like, man, that's really cool. It's so nice to meet you. He gets in a plane, I don't know, the day after, I don't know when he goes home, but he goes home, right? That's it. And so I get an email saying, hey, you have a first time, someone who's never given before, which is important to us. And so I take a look at it. He didn't just give for 1 or 2 people. He gave enough for like almost a dozen people to go to do counseling. And so I followed up with him and I was like, hey, I don't know how much counseling costs in Seattle. Here, it doesn't cost that much. You know what I'm saying? Like, just let you know, that's a lot. And he just went on and said, hey, no, that's what we want to do. And so I called him and I said, hey, when I was thinking through moments that really typify what we want to do with the Catalytic Weekend experience, I was like, that's really, do you mind if I share your story? I won't use your name, but do you mind if I share your story? And he's like, no, I don't mind. And I said, well, I want to let you know, 11 people, their first visit was paid for with what you sent. that we've put more people into Christian counseling in the last 120 days than we have in our entire existence as a church. And some of it, I think it just takes time for people to realize it is okay to go and talk to someone. And for some, I just think honestly, COVID has done a number on us, and we are just now starting to see some of the mental things that people are going to continue to walk through. And so we have positioned ourselves to be a sender from here forward to continue to do that. Well, he just said, hey, that's awesome. That's great. I was talking, I think we want to just keep doing it as often as we can. And I was like, hey, man, that's great. That's really cool. And so I hang up the phone, and like 30 minutes later, I get another email that says, hey, someone has given for the second time. And so it's him. And so I looked. He matched his gift from the first time. And then he let me know. He said, hey, we're just going to try to keep doing this as often as we can. You let me know when you start running low. And if we can, we'll send more. And when I think through the idea of someone that's not even connected on Sundays, like that's not here, that's not a part of it, but when we think through, hey, what does Jesus want us to do? How does Jesus want us to respond? Sometimes it's not even a personal thing for us to do, but it's something for us to do on behalf of other people. And for him and his family, it was, hey, I want to respond in a way that's on behalf of people I've never even met before, but I feel called that, hey, this is what God is leading me to do. That's what we're thinking through when we say, hey, we want to create catalytic weekend experiences. When you think through the idea of surrendered living, the second thing we want to be great at, the definition of surrender is to cease resistance and submit to authority. Now, when we look at this from a Jesus perspective, we're saying there is nothing in our lives, anything at all, that's off limits to Jesus. That if he wants to get involved in any thought process or any decision we make, anything at all, he has access to. So if you think about your life as a house, and you probably have an attic, maybe you have a basement, maybe you got a shed out back, maybe there's a she shed that's a little nicer that you wish was a shed, but it's something else, it's completely useless, but she thinks it's useless, so it's fine. So you have one of those, you're saying, hey, all of my property, Jesus, you can get access to. You can open any door, none of them are locked. You got a key to all of them, which is easy sometimes. Because the truth is, sometimes Jesus says, hey, thanks for the keys. Master key was great. That's really helped. I've gotten in the attic. The thing is, I actually need to take some drywall off the walls. I need to inspect the pipes. Like I need to get really in the thick of it. You still okay with me tearing things apart and making sure the inner workings are good? That's what surrendered living looks like. Where you say, hey, there's honestly nothing off limits to you, Jesus. Everything I have, you have access to, and I want you to have influence over. That's the idea. Now, of course, we keep stats for this, right? Simple stats. Like, we've had 37,102 volunteer hours. That's 1,545.9 days. Or nonstop, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. 4.23 years worth of volunteering has come from Foundation. Nonstop, around the clock. When we look at community partnerships, we've partnered with over 65 different organizations in our community, 173 baptisms. We've invested in 38 church plants around and across the country. We've had 760 ice cream events since we launched the ice cream truck in April of 2017. We've handed out 130,816 pieces of free ice cream in our community. But the truth is that surrender is hard. It's hard. One of the reasons we decided to plant in Foundation is we took 2 demographic studies, and the studies came back telling us that within a 5-mile radius of the courthouse square, 64 to 72% of people in that radius had no connection to any type of religion at all. No connection. And when we think through that idea, when we think through the idea of it being a Bible Belt city and a traditional, historic Georgia town, that number seemed crazy high. And that's just no religion. That's not saying, hey, I'm disconnected from Jesus. That's no religion at all. So the disconnected from Jesus is even higher than that, right? And so when we think through that, we say, hey, we've got to do something about that. And so we planted a church to help be an answer, a solution to the reason of this question. Why don't people go to church, or why do people stop going to church? And I asked that question hundreds and hundreds of times. I still ask it nonstop. I ask anytime I hear somebody says, hey, church is not my thing, I tell them, I say, hey, I'm a pastor. Right? I'm a pastor. I want your honest opinion. Offend me. If it's not offensive, I know you're not telling me the truth. Tell me why. Why is church a no-go for you? Just be brutally honest with me. I can take it. And you know the answers. People are judgmental. People are hypocritical. I feel like I've got to understand everything. Maybe they're going to ask me to stand up in front of everyone and pray or something. Those Christians make you do stupid, crazy things. I don't know. I tell you something that's always on the list. The church only wants me to be there because of my money. And that is something our staff has wrestled with, because we take every single objection and we try to think through, what do we do as a church, and can we tear down the barriers, not reinforce the barriers? And so we started running an experiment last year where I stopped talking about offering from stage. We mentioned it 8 times last year from stage. We didn't pass a plate a single time. We just stopped talking about it. And we didn't know how it was going to work or how it was going to go. We had no clue how that would work. But what we knew is we wanted to, obviously we can't close. Like, that doesn't help us win people to Jesus. So that's not an option. So we knew this might not be a good thing. Like, we might not have, like, it might be bad. We might have to say, hey, I know we hadn't talked about offering, but if y'all could remember, that'd be great. So I knew that was a possibility. That was a possibility. And going into January, we had never missed making budget in our 5 years of existence up until that point. And so we've now run this experiment for 12 months. We're not turning 12 today. For 12 months. And we made budget all 12 months. In fact, we're now 72 for 72 months of meeting budget. Now, that's incredible. That's really special. And it means that there's a lot of followers of Jesus who don't need me to hold their hand in terms of how they surrender their finances to Jesus. That I'm not actually the person who spoon feeds you, which is an incredible thing to know about our church, right? Because the truth is, honestly, if I do have to remind you every week, is it more out of compulsion, or is it because you actually are investing in what Jesus is doing in our community? I get that. Like, there's something to that. But I want to tell you a statistic that came from it that has just completely blown me away. Last year, we had a record of people who gave for the very first time. We had 76 people give to Foundation that had never given before. And we hardly ever talked about it. 8 times, 12 months. It blows me away. When we think about the third piece, life-changing relationships, we define life-changing as enriching, encouraging, and challenging. Now, we think everybody ought to have a life-changing relationship that centers around Jesus. But we're not matchmakers. I can't go and say, hey, do you have any friends? No, I have no friends. Great. Do you have any friends? No, I don't have any friends. Great. Let y'all be friends now. You know what I'm saying? That way y'all don't have to be friendless, right? Like, it doesn't work that way. Like, we're not like church Tinder, where it's like, hey, I'm in search of friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. But what we are responsible for is creating opportunities for you to enter into relationships. Like, we are responsible for creating environments where you can actually meet someone who might have some similar interests. Bare minimum, you know that at the smallest level, you have an interest in at least exploring Jesus because you're here. Relationships are important. I will also be honest with you, when we take a look at this particular piece of what we want to be excellent at, it's the place that needs the most work from our staff. And we worked on it all last year. It was a focus, and it's a continued focus going into this year. We have not figured out how to make this run as a well-oiled machine in terms of this particular idea of the life-changing relationships. We've got more work to do here. But it's something that every single Sunday and every single event that we walk through, we are thinking through, how do we make this a better opportunity for someone to make a relationship that ultimately is enriching and encouraging and challenging? Because the truth is, that is where life really happens. I want to share with you a story that I think is a perfect picture of what we're chasing. A story that doesn't involve a pastoral staff. A story that doesn't require church administration, but a story that shows one individual taking an interest in another individual and life change happening. Y'all have probably noticed that we have a ton of firemen around here. I mean, a ton. Here's two of my favorite.
This is our house, this is our family for 24 hours. Whether he likes it or not, this is our family.
I'm Micah Davis. I work for Coweta County Fire Department. I work at Station 6, and I've been here for about 6 years. After finishing rookie school is about a 9-month-long process, but after finishing rookie school, I went to Station 8 under Lieutenant Jason Jordan.
My name's Jason Jordan, been at Coweta County Fire Department for 27 years now. My family has always been in public safety, but they've always been police officers, and I kind of wanted to go a different route with things, and I've always enjoyed trying to help people.
So the first time I met JJ was at rookie school, and my first impression was him that he was a very well-respected individual. But it wasn't kind of the respect that you come in and you demand the respect, but it was more of like you could tell he was respected because of the man he was. So at the end of our rookie school, we all had a graduation, and then we met in a training room at Station 1, our headquarters station, and that's when they gave out the station assignments of where you would be. My first preference was under Lieutenant Jordan at Station 8. One, because Station 8 was always close to my house, but two, because of the person Lieutenant Jordan was to me at rookie school.
I'm not boasting or anything, but I have a lot of people that do want to come to work with me, and I don't know if it's my demeanor, I don't know if it's just me, or I look this good, or what. I don't know what it is, Pastor. So influence on Lieutenant Davis, I had no idea that I had that much influence on him. The stuff that we see will follow you forever. But I remember one night we had a bad wreck, and Michael was there, and I pulled all the guys to the side, and I said, look, this ain't something we're supposed to see. I said, our eyes aren't supposed to see what this is, but our job requires us to see this. Put this in the back of your head and ask the good Lord to keep it back there so you can keep on. Because if you can't, you think about it, dwell on it, you can't do this job. You can't ride these trucks. So we sat down one night after that, and I told him, I said, man, I'm not no psychiatrist or anything, but anything that ever happens, man, I'm here to talk to you. I've seen a lot, done a lot. I'll talk to you for anything I can. I said, but the biggest thing is, if you can get with the good Lord, He's going to lead you in the right direction and help you out any way that you can.
We always had late night conversations between whether it was sports or golf or just life. One of the things that came up was religion. And I always believed in God growing up through my parents and stuff like that. It was a belief, but I wasn't a follower of God per se. I didn't do things for God. I just believed who He was and what He was, but I didn't follow per se. So through watching Him as a man be a good husband, a good father, a good worker, and His love for Jesus, it's influenced me to want to be like Him, and in that turn want to be like Jesus.
So Jesus plays a huge role in us, in me, as far as investing in other people. When I leave, I don't want to take none of this with me. I want to pass it on to them. A lot of people don't like to invest their time in younger people because they're scared of them. And they're scared of them because they're going to take their job from them. The generation that we have now is the one that's going to lead us into the future.
In this job specifically, it's made me tremendously better in my career because He's allowed me to learn the things early that may have taken Him longer to learn just because of His experiences. Like Lieutenant Jordan said, we see a lot of things that most people don't see in a lifetime, let alone sometimes we see them in a couple days. I think the best thing for me, whether it's good or bad, it's putting it with Jesus. You know, and letting him be the glory. From the start of my baptism, when I walked out on stage, I walked up, got in the water. The water was relatively warm. I remember JJ telling me, "I'm proud of you." I was then baptized, and when he brought me out of the water, it was one of the most refreshing feelings I've ever felt. I remember him hugging me and telling me he loves me, and then getting out of the pool and being able to see my wife and daughter at that point.
I don't think there's a word to explain how I feel about it, of how proud I am of him, not only in the fire service, but being the young man that he is compared to me, obviously, but family man also for his family. And not just being, family here, but his family at home and the family for the church also. Why do I feel comfortable inviting people to Foundation? I love it. But I try my best to explain it as best as I can for everybody, but I want them to experience it on their own to see how it is, to fall in love with it like me and my family have.
It was a sense of family, not just to the people that go to church, but the family of the community. Through the fire service and through church, I know that I have a very large family now.
I guess the only thing we left out was you asking me to be in your wedding. That was about it. I was in his wedding for him too, so suit and tie and stuff, so that's definitely not me. So
we got a good picture of him holding me like a baby too.
Yeah, I was holding him like a baby, so that is true. See, stuff like this is the reason why I got all this, and it's very little, so, but I wouldn't change it for nothing. Wouldn't change it for nothing.
It's stories like that we're chasing down. I love what Jason said. He said, when I leave, I don't want to take none of this with me. I want to pass it on to them. Most folks that listen to him say that would think he's talking about firefighter trade secrets. But that's not all he's talking about. He's talking about Jesus. Which brings us back to the first thing that we read right at the outset. When Paul is writing a letter to a church that he was so instrumental in growing and starting, Paul was thinking about those people, and Paul said, "I thank my God every time I remember you." Now, while Paul thinks that about that church, our hope is that the people who planted us would think that about our church. But the truth is, you know what I know is true? I know that what Paul said about the Philippian church is the same thing that Jason says when he thinks about Micah. The same prayer. I thank God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for you, I pray with joy. And that's what Jason thinks when he thinks about his relationship with Micah. Why? Because of his partnership in the gospel. Because it wasn't just knowledge that was passed on to Micah for him to then be baptized by Jason here on this stage right behind me, but it was because there was an understanding that Micah at some point will then pass on what Jason has passed on to him to someone else. And then Micah will stand in the place where Jason stood, and he will help someone else enter into that relationship of the death and burial and resurrection of Jesus. And that's the way it works. And the truth is, for 2024, what we read here, what we need to internalize is who is our person. Who's the person that we're going to say, every time I remember you in my prayers, I thank God for you. Because that's the way that the church is supposed to work. That's why relationships that are life-changing are so important. Because it's not just about filling my social calendar. It's about filling heaven. It's about the idea of saying that there's an enormous amount of people here who are disconnected from Jesus. And while they will enrich and encourage and challenge me in my life, the truth is that I, through the power of Jesus, will enrich and challenge and encourage them. And then I will begin to thank God every time I think about them, every time that I pray. and that we are all called to that very same mission. That this year, that's what it should be about. That this year, as the year closes on 2024 here in 11 and a half months, that we would feel the same way that Paul felt about the Philippians, that our church planters think about us, that Jason thinks about Micah, that it would be we think about fill in the blank. And that person might be someone you know already, or it might be someone you meet next week because they moved to the area, or their kid just joined your kid's ball team, or fill in the blank. But at the end of the day, we should all be in the same boat. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel. From the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. At the end of the year, because of your decision to follow Jesus and give him even your relationships, who will you be thanking God for because of their partnership in the gospel with you? We are a church that leads to Jesus because Jesus is in the lead. We are a church that leads to Jesus because Jesus is in the lead. That's who we are becoming. Happy birthday, Foundation.